What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you all of the newly releasing games in 2025 that I plan to review in some form or fashion as we begin to kick off 2025 in gaming. A nice place to start is to simply lay out those plans and talk about them. So to that end, a few things to mention right here at the beginning that are rather important. For starters, obviously things are subject to change, things get pushed, delayed, very rarely do they get brought forward. So as the year goes by and things get clarified, etc., we'll adapt as we go. But nonetheless, I wanted this list to be as exhaustive as I could possibly make it and try to cover all of my bases, and with that in mind, I still might miss one or two things, so if anything happens to have fallen through the cracks, by all means just ask a question down in the comment below and I'll get back to you. To that exact end, however, this particular video is going to largely be divided up into three sections of games, and that is games that are almost certainly releasing in 2025 because they either already have release dates and are soon, or there simply seems to be a fair degree of confidence there. The second group being early access games that are slated for their full release in 2025, because I do not, as a rule, review games that are in early access before they fully release. And then finally, the last section will be games that could release in 2025, but either don't have a release date and it's just rumors or, things like that. Basically, the might happen, might not pile. But even before all of that, we still have yet more to talk about right here at the beginning of the video, because the first thing I want to reiterate to people is that this is a PC channel. Some things aren't on this list because I either A, have no interest in them, or B, they're just straight up not coming to PC. And then also, previously released games that are coming to PC this year, like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, I'll take a look at, but they won't be on this list because they're not technically new releases. So with that exact thing in mind, titles like Grand Theft Auto 6 and Ghost of Yotei, both games I'm actually fairly interested in looking at, but when they come to PC, which they are not currently slated to do in 2025. So there's that. And then also at the same time, two other titles I know are releasing this year that I know are going to be big releases, but just simply aren't for me, are games like Civilization 7. Not a big 4X strategy guy, wouldn't really know where to begin in reviewing something like that. And then the other one is Monster Hunter Wilds. I'm not really into the Monster Hunter franchise at all, and while I might make a video talking about that one if I decide to pick it up and play it, I just wouldn't feel comfortable offering a full-blown review for it because I know, frankly, not enough about them. But now that we've got all of that out of the way, let's start to talk about the games I will be covering. But as a final mention, we're going to be moving relatively quick here. Obviously, these games aren't out, and while I have actually played a few of them for one reason or another, clearly there's not that much information out there about them. But kicking off the section of the almost certainly happening reviews, we first have The Altars. The Altars is a sort of survival crafting experience where you will be making clones of yourself with slightly altered pasts to make them different versions of you as you try to survive a hostile planet. I played a demo and made some videos about that one already. It looks very promising. I'm excited to see how that turns out. Second, we have Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. I was a very big fan of the first game. I'm excited to check out the second one. It seems to be at least trying to improve upon all the initial game systems, and I think if they can land that, it'll be a great game. That one's releasing on February 4th, very close by actually. Third, we have Avowed on February 18th. Very excited for this one. I love the Pillars of Eternity universe, which this is set in. I've already gotten to play a bit of it via a preview back in November, where I got to take an extended look at it, and while I certainly don't know if it will actually turn out really well, I certainly hope it does, and I'm looking forward to it. Then we've got Atomfall, a sort of action-adventure based loosely on real-life events following a nuclear disaster, being made by Rebellion Games, most notably known for their Sniper Elite series, I would say probably. What I've seen of that game looks cool, and I'm excited to try it out, but honestly don't know too much else about it just yet. And that is out on March 27th, which happens to be the same day the first Berserker Khazan is releasing. A Dark Souls-like action-adventure RPG type of thing. I'd like to cover those games, so no surprise I would cover this one really. Very much so enjoy the art style, looks really cool. Those games, honestly though, can have a difficult hill to climb because there is honestly quite a few of them and a lot of them do the same stuff, so how it sets itself apart from those games will matter most. But believe it or not, that's pretty much it for games that actually have release dates at the moment. Everything else is release windows or no date at all, so we'll simply have to find out. Kicking it off with the Necromancer's Tale in what is planned for, I believe, July, is a indie CRPG about a young man's journey to becoming a necromancer. I've played a demo of this one as well. Obviously very indie, but I love CRPGs. This one is promising. It's trying to do something a little unique, and that seems like it might be a fun experience. We then have Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2. I've talked about this one quite a bit here and there over the years, so I'll keep it simple here. There's a million reasons to acknowledge all the red flags about this one. I'm remaining optimistic. I hope it's great. I acknowledge it might be terrible as well, but I'm hoping they manage to pull it off, but I'm reviewing it one way or the other. Then we have Wuchang Fallen Feathers, another Dark Souls-like action game set during the Ming Dynasty, where we'll be fighting off all sorts of fantastical dark fantasy creatures, which happens to again be another type of game I cover fairly regularly, and we'll see if this manages to set itself apart from other games that do this. Then we have The Outer Worlds 2, also announced for 2025 at some point. The Outer Worlds 2, again, just looks like a game that's trying to iterate and expand upon everything that the first game did right, and hopefully alleviate some of the issues at the same time, and I think if they manage to nail that, it'll be great. The first Outer Worlds was one of Obsidian's biggest games, sales-wise. I enjoyed it a fair bit, and I'm looking forward to the sequel. Simple as that, really. Then we have Crimson Desert, an open-world action-adventure from Pearl Abyss, the company behind Black Desert, and every time I see this game, it looks really, really cool, and that has me excited to see if they can actually manage to pull everything they're trying to do off. But simply put, this is a gigantic, ambitious game, and we've seen that go wrong plenty of times before, so I acknowledge it's certainly possible. But as always, I'm hoping for the best, and we'll see how it goes. Then we have Mafia The Old Country. This game is, of course, set in the Mafia universe, I guess you'd call it, but it's a prequel. It's actually taking place in the early 1900s, exploring the origins of organized crime, but this one is aiming to be an immersive sort of story adventure type game, so we'll see how it all pans out. I admit I'm not wildly familiar with the Mafia franchise. I did enjoy 3 well enough, but this one is looking pretty cool to me, and honestly just looks like something a little different, which is plenty enough reason for me to take a look at it. Next up, we've got Clair Obscur Expedition 33, an upcoming JRPG that is looking exceptionally flashy with a host of unique environments that takes place in a world where a paintress, as they call her, wakes up, paints a number, and everyone of that age just sort of disappears. And it's a game mixing a bit of real-time action with traditional turn-based combat, while at the same time going big on its art style and everything. So again, this is a game where everything I've seen about it looks really cool and like it would be up my alley, so I'm hoping it manages to turn out well. And then last but not least, we have Menace. Menace is an upcoming turn-based strategy game from Overhyped Studios, which is the company behind Battle Brothers, which is a very beloved tactic-style game. This one, though, has you fighting off an alien menace across many different worlds as you bypass that threat. Sort of, I would say, not entirely dissimilar from something like XCOM, which may or may not be by design. But I do love a good TRPG, and this is from a well-known studio in that space, so absolutely looking forward to that one. Now, that is basically everything that is releasing with a high amount of confidence, I would say. So next, we're going to move on to our early access titles. These are games that are launching out of early access for the most part into the full review space. Now, I do want to give a special shout out to Solasta 2. That is a game that is supposed to be entering early access in 2025, but it's a CRPG and I love those games, so hoping it turns out well, and I'll obviously cover it in early access, but it will not be a review. Now, as for games that are launching out of early access, do remember that obviously the very nature of early access, some of this stuff might very well get delayed, but is currently planned for 2025, and we'll go from there. First up, we've got Banquet for Fools, an upcoming RPG from Hannah and Joseph Games, who are behind things like Mecha Jammer and Serpent in the Staglands. In particular, this game takes place in the same place as Serpent in the Staglands, and what I've played of it already in its early access form seems super promising. I think if they manage to deliver that across the entire game, it'll be great, and it already looks very unique. Next up is Enshrouded, another survival crafting game that released into early access last year, and is set to release fully sometime in 2025. And again, what I've actually played of it, very promising, especially because while it does have all that survival and crafting element stuff, it also kind of feels like just a normal RPG on the side of that, which I've really enjoyed messing around with myself. And if they can deliver on that experience, which is already very good based on the feedback they've gotten, I think it will absolutely land at release. release, and that's why I'm reviewing it and excited to take a look at it. Then we have Greedfall 2. Greedfall 2 is a slightly different situation. They made some significant changes to the combat system. It had a very mixed reception after the initial games, I would say. Much more positive approach. And to that end, if any sweeping overhauls are coming, this probably isn't going to release in 2025, frankly. But more than anything, they significantly changed how the combat system works in this one. It is much more akin to something like Dragon Age Origins, but is very rough around the edges right now. So we'll keep an eye on this one and see if they manage to pull it off. But I enjoyed Greedfall, so I'm definitely reviewing the sequel here when it actually releases. Then we have Hades 2. What am I going to tell you about Hades 2 that you don't already know at this point? Launched into early access last year to a very successful initial release, but obviously needed some polishing, and I'm excited to play the finished version of it. Then we've got New Arc Line, currently set for its full release in late 2025. This game is trying to capture the mix of steampunk and magic that games like Arcanum have in the past, and it is surprisingly good. I actually enjoyed this one a lot. Again, early access needs some polish, but it is very promising, and I'm hoping they manage to nail it because I think this game is going to be really cool, and as a CRPG, it is right up my alley. I'm very excited to play it when it's done. More so than I already have. I've actually made a few videos about this one, which is similar to No Rest for the Wicked, a sort of isometric Souls-like game that launched to, I would say, a bit of a rough release in early access, but basically the general consensus here is this game is going to be great when it's finished, but it has so far been pretty slow going. So again, this is one of those ones I think actually might not hit the 2025 mark, but if it does, very excited to play it. I've enjoyed what is in early access, but things like performance issues that we're having trouble with at the beginning, plus just honestly needing more content and things to be added in as it stands, is really where we're waiting on now. So again, I think it'll be great when it's done, and hopefully we'll get there. Then we have Path of Exile 2. This one is a bit unique because it's much more recent, frankly, and so far, very much so enjoyed it. I think Grinding Gear Games is definitely at the top of the pile when it comes to making ARPGs these days, and I think that shows via what is already released into early access. But when it comes to reviewing this one when it actually launches, the main thing I think will simply be kind of taking a look at it for what it is right then, because this game is going to be getting prolonged support, which means that review will definitely not be a 100%, but rather more of just a how is this game right now. But I'm very excited to play more of it, as is just about everybody else, I imagine. Then we have Swordhaven, a CRPG from the makers of Atom RPG, this time inspired very much by the likes of some of the original Baldur's Gate games, and I love that type of stuff. This looks to be a fairly big step up for them, but is, of course, an indie title and thus very janky, but I'm definitely here for more CRPGs. Then we have one of the bigger early access titles right now, and that is Tainted Grail, The Fall of Avalon, based on that same property from Wayward Realms. This game has been in early access for a while. It's been improving that entire time. I took a look at it not all that long ago, and got to see a lot of that for myself. And while the comparisons to Skyrim are naturally going to happen, I do think this game is trying to improve upon a bunch of stuff and become its own thing, which hopefully it manages to do. But I've already enjoyed what I've played of it, which is promising for its full release, which is slated for sometime in Q2, but we'll see what happens. And then last but not least for early access stuff is Cyberknights Flashpoint. This is another TRPG where you lead a host of cyberpunk mercenaries through their world and try to set up heists and of course execute upon them. And while perhaps a little niche TRPGs and CRPGs are what I'm all about, and I'm excited to see how they manage to pull this one off, as it has a lot of interesting elements, and I'm excited to see how they come together. But that does it for early access stuff. Now we have the rest of the releases, which are stuff that might release in 2025, might not. I would not be surprised at all if any of these get pushed or delayed or announced for 2026, things like that. But very generally, they could release in 2025, and if they do, I'll certainly be taking a look at them. Kicking it off with Doom: The Dark Ages. This one is on this part of the list simply because they announced that initial trailer and then it's been pretty quiet since then, so I think it would not be unreasonable to see this pushed out of 2025. But basically, it's more Doom. The last one was very well received. I'm honestly enjoying games where I just get to destroy everything I see, to break up all the RPGs here lately, and that's kind of why I'm looking forward to this one. Hopefully it delivers. But then we have have Judas, a title from Ghost Story Games, headed up notably by Ken Levine, and this game is kind of course, iterating upon things like BioShock. This time, it is set upon a starship that is slowly falling apart that your character will simply be trying to escape, which is going to put you at odds with the ship's factions, and basically what I want to see here is if they manage to iterate on the BioShock formula enough to make this, good, frankly. And we'll see if they manage it. Next up, we've got Wayward Realms, an upcoming title from Once Lost Games that I've heard some rumors might be coming out in 2025. Again, been pretty slow progress there, which is unsurprising though, because this particular game is very ambitious, as it looks to be under the direction of Ted Peterson and Julian LeFay, recreating some of their work on Elder Scrolls Arena and Daggerfall and some of the gameplay loops that went into that, but obviously looking a little bit nicer than they did back then. But either way, they seem to be making steady progress, and the idea of it is certainly very cool, but this is one of those projects that looks gigantically ambitious, so there's plenty of room for, I would say, rough edges. Then we've got Clockwork Revolution in Exile's next game. Looks like, again, another game that is going to be kind of like Arcanum in some ways, a lot of steampunk, and in this particular case, time traveling of some description as we seek to work out what is happening in this city. Looks neat, hoping it's good. Then we've got South of Midnight, an action-adventure set in a fantastical imagining of the American South, which is where I personally live, which is why I'm very interested in this game, because honestly, as shallow as it is, a good way to get me to play basically any game is to set it somewhere I have lived, and I want to see if they can nail that. But either way, definitely reviewing that one. Then we've got Pathfinder Abomination Vaults, an upcoming ARPG that was a Kickstarter project from Become Studios, as a channel that is greatly known for my Pathfinder coverage. Obviously, I'm checking out more Pathfinder games. I don't know how the translation of a game like Pathfinder is going to work into specifically a ARPG this time around, but it is something I backed on Kickstarter, so I'm excited to find out. This game was estimated to be released in 2025, but, there's no hard facts there. But the main thing I want to know is just, can they make that work in ARPG format? And we shall see. Then we've got Outward 2, a game that honestly we haven't heard much about since its initial announcement, so again, I think it's very likely it could get pushed out of 2025, but I really enjoyed the first Outward. Want to see if what they can do here and anything they might want to add will perhaps cleaning up some of the original game, which often got called a walking simulator, because speaking for myself, it really did take I would say 5 or 6 hours for that game to really click with me. But nonetheless, excited for another version of it. Then we've got Warhammer 40k Mechanicus 2, a TRPG that puts you in the role of the Adeptus Mechanicus. I've actually reviewed the first one already as well. I love a good TRPG. Really enjoying Warhammer 40k lately. Makes sense I would review this one, especially since the first one was pretty good. Definitely got my attention for the second. Then we've got the Fable reboot that is supposed to be coming. Honestly, we know next to nothing about this. The original trilogy is so varied in what it was trying to do and how it changed over the years, so this reboot or reimagining of that series could be just about anything, not least of which because the bar for being better than that original trilogy is honestly pretty low these days, and I re-reviewed all 3 of them recently and verified that for myself, so we'll see what happens. Then we have Shadow of the Road. This is an upcoming CRPG being published by Owlcat Games, but not made by them. Puts us in a sort of steampunk machines and magic, but set in feudal Japan, which is certainly interesting. and I think might put an interesting spin on the type of game I was definitely always going to check out no matter what. Not actually sure if this one is releasing in 2025, but looking forward to it if it is, which is a similar case for Rue Valley in that it is being published by Owlcat Games as well. This game has actually been given a playable alpha and stuff already. It's inspired by things like Disco Elysium, it's very narrative heavy, but basically you replay a section of a day over and over again because the world just sort of unceremoniously ends at the end of it, and naturally we want to get to the bottom of that. So I think that'll be a cool narrative experience for next year, but that does bring us to our final entry here, and this is Dying Light the Beast, which has gotten a few videos here and there, but mostly I want to take a look at that one because it looks like it might very well be what I wanted from Dying Light 2 that it just didn't quite deliver on, and that's what I'm hoping for there. But I think that is just about everything to say about the various new releases coming in 2025 that I am definitely very interested in, at least at the moment. So as we start moving into the year, we'll see if any of this stuff actually gets pushed out or delayed or anything else. Otherwise, I'm looking forward to reviewing them, and hopefully you are looking forward to seeing those reviews. And if you are, certainly like, comment, subscribe, stick around, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.